Welcome back to Joe's Son of Boxing. Let's talk a bit about Bud Crawford, who, as you know, scored that magnificent stoppage win over Errol Spence Jr. Fantastic performance from a real great fighter. But of course, the question now is what's ahead of him? What's next? So I thought we'd talk a little bit about his options because let's bear in mind that, Bud started his career, won his first world title at lightweight. Clearly, he's settled into the welterweight division. And I actually, during the weigh-in, the final weigh-in, I thought, well, he looks a bit drawn in the face. He had that scruffy beard, but he actually remarked afterwards, when Spence was talking about a rematch at 154, yeah, I can do that because it wasn't easy for me to make 147. And I can kind of believe that when you look at the guy's physique. We do, as we get older, he's nearly 36, actually. I think he's 36 in September. You naturally put on weight. You become naturally bigger, as some of us know. But with Bud, it's in a good way, So I don't think he's going to have a problem at 154. Not in terms of natural weight. It was good how he settled into welterweight. And every fight he's had at welterweight has been a stoppage. He's fought nothing but championship fights, world championship fights at welterweight, and he's won the lot by knockout. So time to move up. He's now at the point where, because of his age, every fight really, well, actually his age and his status, every fight really has to be a meaningful fight. There are no sort of fillers, no sort of warm-ups, no tune-ups. And that he probably needs that to stay motivated. So a move to 154, the obvious choice. Well, first of all, let's stay at welterweight to start with, because there is, you can argue that there's a little bit of food still on the table, and that food is called Jaron Ennis. Now, I think Ennis is a terrific fighter, a really, really good fighter. And to be honest with you, I'd love to. Well, I think like a lot of people, I would love to see this fight. I think it's a great fight. But is it going to happen? Because Ennis is the guy who is what you might call the heir apparent. And yeah, I think he's got a great future ahead of him, Ennis. He's 31 wins, no defeats, no draws, 28 KOs. He's 26 years old, so you can argue that he's just coming into his prime. He's 5'10", as opposed to, I think 5'8" is Crawford, and he's the young gun. He's the young, he's walking into town looking to take on the old master. Now, without question, Crawford, is perfectly capable of beating Boots. But would you rule out a Boots win? Would you completely rule it out? I think after Saturday's performance, everyone's going to say, well, Crawford is, probably pound for pound best. Inoue is the only one that gives him an argument. But who's going to pick against Crawford after that performance on Saturday? And yes, with hindsight, you can look at Errol Spence and say, maybe the weight was a factor, the car crash, the live-in. Maybe he's taken years off his career and put miles on the clock, so to speak. Yeah, okay, we can be wise after the event and say that. Crawford is a well-preserved 35, nearly 36-year-old. He lives the life. He doesn't party. He's a family man. He does a lot for his community. He really lives that Spartan life and works extremely hard, which you need to, and hence the reason he's preserved his body. So I don't think don't get me wrong, I don't think he's past it. Obviously he's not past it. But Ennis is coming into his prime, and those fights are always really interesting, where you get the old master against the heir apparent. You know what I mean? It's terrific stuff. Matching them up is terrific. So I would love to see Crawford against Ennis. Crawford's never ducked anyone in his life. He's actually campaigned for the toughest fights, as he spent 5 years campaigning. When, as he said, PBC tried to freeze him out, but he went after Spence consistently, year after year, defended his belt, almost made Spence fight him. Because don't forget, Spence, had he not fought Crawford, has got a mandatory with the IBF coming up. And who is that? Jaron Ennis. So he probably thought, there's more money against Crawford, I'll finally take the fight. By the way, I'm not slagging off Spence. I think Spence is an absolutely terrific fighter. I'm not sure his career's been handled as well as it could have been. He's no doubt made some money. And obviously he hasn't lived the life. I mean, he drinks a lot, has drunk a lot in the past, got DUIs on his record. Spence, Crawford's the opposite of Spence, put it that way. And the impression I get with Ennis is that he's another one who is disciplined, who lives the life. So at 5'10", 74-inch reach, this is Ennis, by the way. He's 2 inches taller, but he's got the same reach as Crawford, who's got very long arms for a guy of his height and knows how to use them, obviously. I'd like to see that fight. In terms of other welterweights, I don't think Crawford really needs to, to prove himself against anyone. I mean, after, say, he beats Ennis, is anyone going to begrudge him moving up to light middle or super welter, if you prefer? I don't think so. I think people, want to see him. I mean, there's Virgil Ortiz, who might even move up himself. Who else have we got there? I'm struggling to think. I mean, in terms of welterweights, I don't know. I mean, people like Rashidi Ellis, you wouldn't put money on them beating Spence. Spence would probably toy with people of that level. And again, Blair Cobbs is another one, and he beats the lot. Ennis is the only one that's left really for him to devour. So let's say he goes up to super welterweight. Now the obvious one is Jermell Charlo, who is he's got one defeat, one draw in his record, but he's avenged both. Brian Castano was his last fight back in May of last year, 2022, and he has all the belts. And Crawford will obviously want him, because Crawford will want to say, I have been undisputed champion in 3 consecutive divisions, which, when you imagine that as an achievement, it's extraordinary, really. But of course, Charlo has a fight upcoming with Saul Canelo Alvarez, jumping up 2 weight divisions, daring to be great, as they say, which, okay, I can live with that. I can live with that idea. Don't forget, in the past, fighters like Carmen Basilio jumped up. A lot of fighters did. There were no sort of junior super divisions in the old days, so they would jump essentially what would nowadays be two weight divisions. And sometimes they would be successful. Sometimes they wouldn't. We even had middleweights taking on heavyweights. So I don't know. I mean, but it's interesting because after the Spence fight, Crawford leant over the ropes and looked at Charlo as if to say, you're next, I want you next. And Charlo was interviewed about his future and said, I haven't finished at 154, I'm still there. So probably he will go up and fight Canelo, and then he will look to come down to 154 again. Now, if you jump up 2 weight divisions and you bulk up, taking that weight off can be an issue. And there was no better example in my lifetime than Roy Jones Jr., who went up to heavyweight, fought John Ruiz, and then wrecked his body coming back down to light heavy. I mean, he just wrecked it. He won a close fight against Antonio Tarver to defend his light heavy belts. And then he got flattened in 2 rounds by Tarver. And he was never the same fighter. Glenn Johnson knocked him out. Again, that was at light heavy. He was never the same fighter. So you've got to be careful here. You've got to do it right. I don't like the idea of Charlo going up to super middle and then coming back down to 154. I think he's going to struggle. I might be wrong. I hope I am wrong, because ideally I want to see Charlo defend all 4 of those belts against Terence Crawford. So that's ultimately, that would be a fantastic fight. Because I rate Charlo highly. I like the idea that he, stuck with it and he avenged his loss and his draw with knockout wins. I don't mind if a fighter's got a loss on their record. It doesn't matter to me. To me, losses are a chance to sort of learn and reverse them. You learn something. Sometimes we learn lessons in life the hard way, and that means getting defeated sometimes. But Charlo, if you look at his dimensions, he's only got a 73-inch reach, which is an inch shorter than Bud. There's not much in it, of course, but the thing that is striking is he's 6 foot tall. And Bud's sort of 5'8", 5'9". That will be interesting to see how a long, rangy guy tries to deal with Bud, or vice versa. So I definitely think that that is a brilliant fight for the future. I'll definitely want to see that fight. But if it is going to happen, it's not going to happen until Bud has had the rematch with Crawford at 154, probably. Bud has had the rematch with Spence at 154, and Charlo has fought Canelo. And then what happens if Charlo actually beats Canelo? Is he going to stay at 168 or come back to 154, or maybe try for 160? I don't know. It seems to me that fight's quite a way away. And don't forget, nearly 36 years old, but I know he's well preserved, very, very as well preserved as you can get for that age. But nevertheless, Father Time, as they say, as the cliche goes, is undefeated. So I really want to see that fight, but I think it's in the distance. I think it's probably going to be later rather than sooner, which is a shame. But yeah, then of course the rematch with Spence at 154. I think most of us would say that Bud would deal with Spence again, although it's not a foregone conclusion. Spence is a good fighter. I think he might have done some damage to his body, obviously not just with the car crashes, 2 car crashes, detached retina, drinking a bit, but also making 147 for too long, which can actually take years off your career as well if you drain yourself totally. And he did look very sort of drawn and gaunt at the weigh-in. So if he goes to 154, he might be physically a bit stronger. That's going to obviously, make a difference. He might be able to give Bud more of a fight, a bit more of a competitive fight. But I would fully expect Crawford to win that rematch, quite possibly by stoppage. But let's be honest here. If Bud Crawford retired tomorrow and never threw another punch, clearly he's a cast iron Hall of Famer. He's a great fighter, best welterweight of his era. There's been talk of, hypothetical, obviously, fantasy matchup with Floyd Mayweather. Looking at things, at welterweight I'm talking now, Mayweather defensively is better. And he was, a dozen times better than Errol Spence defensively. So it would have been difficult for Bud to sort of unlock the door, unlock the safe, so to speak. But I see that as an extremely competitive match, and I wouldn't bet against Crawford, against a welterweight Mayweather. I think it's perfectly feasible that Crawford would have beaten Mayweather, but we'll never know, obviously. That's a fantasy matchup. But anyway, look, leave your comments below. Tell me what you think about Crawford. Tell me what you think he should do next, what he's going to do next. What about 154 and Charlo, Jermell Charlo? Do you reckon he can beat Charlo? If so, how? Would he knock him out? Would Charlo beat him? You never know. Charlo's a good fighter, very good fighter, proven. So comments below. If you're new to the channel, you can subscribe. I'd appreciate that. Like the video also if you liked it. Spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. And yeah, looking forward to reading your comments. And bye for now.